Welcome to Impact Makers Radio, featuring industry thought leaders sharing problem-solving insights to help grow your business and live the life you love. And here's your host, Stewart Andrew Alexander.
Hi, and welcome to another Let's Talk Divorce conversation. And during this segment of the show, ladies and gentlemen, I am so pleased. In fact, I'm honored to have certified divorce coach Pegotty Cooper, president and co-founder of Divorce Coaching Inc., all the way from Tampa, Florida. Now, Pegotty, who is considered to be an authority in the area of divorce, will be talking to you today about a very interesting topic, and I can't wait for us to dig into this. See, Peggy's taken the time out of her busy schedule to come and talk to us about avoiding the 6 biggest mistakes in divorce, as in mistakes at the root of most legal and financial mistakes. So, if you are one of the increasing amounts of people facing or even going through divorce in the Tampa, Florida area, it might be a good idea for you to down tools, log out of Facebook, give Twitter a break, and switch off Instagram or anything else you happen to be doing which may cause a distraction. And you know something, you may even want to grab a notepad and pen and get ready to take some notes as we listen in to what Pegotty has to share with us today. So, with that said, let's not keep her waiting any longer. Welcome to the show, Pegotty.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
And thank you so much also, Pegotty. Let's just jump straight in with our first question of the day. Could you just briefly, in your own words, describe the kinds of people who you serve and the various types of situations they find themselves in when they come to you for your help?
Sure. I, as you said, I am a certified divorce coach, which is really like a thinking partner. And I work with individuals, not couples, but individuals, both men and women, who are find themselves overwhelmed by divorce and have a lot at stake in reaching a favorable outcome in that whole divorce process. And the high stakes could be their family, their businesses, their job, their relationships, and maybe even their community standing. So whatever is important to them to preserve through the divorce process, I help them make the best possible decisions for their future based on their particular interests, needs, and concerns.
Okay, Pegotty, now that we know who you help, it goes without saying that anything you share with us today is not legal advice or legal assistance. It's purely for the purpose of sharing information. Can we both agree on that, Pegotty?
Absolutely. I never give legal advice. That's not the job of a coach.
We get ourselves in trouble, right? So,
right.
With that said then, Pegotty, when you think about those individuals who come to you for your help, and I'm sure there are so many of them out there, but what's the most common misconceptions they have surrounding today's topic of avoiding the 6 biggest mistakes in divorce and the mistakes that they make at the root of most legal and financial mistakes?
Well, most people that enter into the divorce process have positions that they take. Positions they take like, I want to keep the house, or whatever it might be that's part of the divorce settlement. And generally, they're working with other professionals in the divorce process who don't really understand how to move a person from a position to a different point of view, to shifting perspectives. And so often the positions that people take cause them to make some very big mistakes in the divorce process because they're not looking at the whole picture, they're just looking at their particular position. So, when they're working with, so many of the professionals who work with these individuals see their position as kind of an inconvenience. something they need to push through and kind of deal with by convincing them or cajoling them or coercing them into changing their position. And so the divorce client, feels kind of defensive. They keep up their defenses and hunker down deeper into that position. And nothing goes the way they want it to go. And perhaps the people they're working with see the position, see the problem that their client is exhibiting, but they don't know what to do with it. And so maybe if I gave you an example, it would help to.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. That's a fantastic insight that you just shared with us. So thank you for that. And let's do that. Let's dig a little bit deeper into what you just shared with us, and obviously keeping your clients' confidentiality in mind. So please
Absolutely.
do go ahead.
So I had a client who was meeting with a group of divorce professionals, a couple of lawyers and a financial professional, and they were trying to hammer out the settlement agreement. And they hadn't been very successful at doing that, and it had already cost a lot of money to be really nowhere. And so my client, who had some financial savvy, because he was, he just had some financial savvy, he was getting very frustrated. The professionals he was working with tried to offer a lot of alternatives for the settlement, and they just kept adding to the confusion and they were really overwhelming his spouse with the details. And every time, somebody objected to a solution, their answer was to create more options, which was simply overwhelming the parties with more details. So this person came to me because they really were kind of fed up with this, and they needed to figure out what they could do to kind of unjam this whole situation. So when we sat down and talked about what was going on, I asked him if there had ever been an ideal solution in his mind, like in all of the things that had happened during all of this time. Had there been an ideal solution? And he said, yes, he had actually presented the ideal solution that he thought was really generous and fair to his wife. And she had actually accepted it, but had countered, as often happens in divorce, with another request for additional money on some issues that had come up, I think, with some properties or something that were part of the settlement. And my client had gotten kind of angry with this additional demands because he thought he'd given a really generous offer. And on principle, he rejected the counteroffer. So, of course, this is what prompted this group of professionals that he'd been working with to start generating more alternatives, and trying to convince both of them that there was a solution in here somewhere. And they were relying really on the financial professional to keep generating more financial solutions. And everybody was really ready to give up. So when he told me that there'd been this ideal solution he'd rejected on principle, that gave me the clue that he was making one of the 6 biggest mistakes that you make in divorce, which is digging in your heels and wanting to be right, something that we call taking the my way or the highway approach in the book that we wrote about the 6 biggest mistakes. And as we explored this situation, and I just kept asking him questions and reflecting back what he was saying, he had a sudden new awareness. He kind of connected the dots, and he could see that it was really time to go back and revive that offer, that his digging in his heels and saying no, was really, it had already cost him more than that, in legal fees to generate all the rest of these non-ideal solutions. So, he went back and revived the offer and got his ideal settlement.
So I'm curious, Pegotty, is mediation, or let's say the move towards using mediation in divorce cases, is that more of a trend now?
Well, in many states, mediation is required. as a prerequisite to going to court, because the courts are so clogged up with, especially the family law courts are very clogged up with cases. And so they require, at least a shot at mediation. Sometimes it's court-ordered mediation. Sometimes your attorneys will opt to have private mediation. It's definitely, and then of course there's this emerging practice called collaborative law practice, which brings in, a number of different people together to help a client solve, two clients solve the problem, kind of mediate the problem. And I think that people are becoming aware that there are more options now for them about how to arrive at the decisions about divorce, all of the decisions, whether it's property and asset and debt division or, the alimony and child support. So, the pitfall in what happened with my client was that nobody, even if they saw the problem, they didn't really understand what to do with it, except generate more confusion, right? And trying to convince them that somewhere in here, now we've given you 6 solutions. One of these has got to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And really, it wasn't the numbers or the details about the settlement that made the difference. It was really the client's thinking about the problem that made a difference. When he was thinking he had to be right, he was going to be right on principle. He was going to dig his heels in. That's what blocked him being able to see any other possibilities. And so it's the client's thinking about the problem and not the problem itself, which actually causes the biggest mistakes in divorce. And there are a number of different thinking mistakes that we make. The perspective of the client, they get attached to a particular position for lots of different reasons, and then they follow up on that position, and the position may be, taking the my way or the highway, digging my heels in to be right. It may be, I'm done with this. I'm just going to throw in the towel, and I don't really care what happens because I just want this over and done with. Or it may be, I'm getting divorced. I've just met somebody new. This is my out. We call that betting the farm on another relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And another one might be presented with lots of options. You just get overwhelmed, and you just dig your heels in and say, I want some guarantees and certainty in this, right? I want, and because they're afraid of the future. Or another one will be, I'm just going to let somebody else make this decision. I'm going to turn this over to my attorney. I'm going to let my attorney make this decision. Or I'm going to I'm going to allow my spouse to make the decision. Or maybe the judge would be a better person to make this choice. I'm just going to abdicate on my decision making.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that case study with us, Pegotty. So, ladies and gentlemen, as a reminder, my guest today is certified divorce coach Pegotty Cooper, president and co-founder of the Divorce Coaching Inc. in Tampa, Florida. And today's topic is avoiding the 6 biggest mistakes in divorce. Now, with that in mind, Pegotty, and for those people who are listening in right now and they're wanting to know more, they're wanting to know how to avoid some of the common pitfalls out there. Now, in all of your years of being a certified divorce coach, I'm sure there are so many pitfalls that you could share with us today. However, what's the most common but unknown pitfall that the listeners need to avoid regardless of what situation they find themselves in?
Well, I think one of the biggest pitfalls is thinking that you can go it alone. Because when we get caught in our own, thinking process, there's no way for us we have a lot of blind spots. We just have a lot of blind spots, and the fear and emotional impact of divorce really puts up these walls that prevent us from seeing any of the other options out there. So, talking to somebody who can help you look at other options, can help you discover that maybe what you're thinking right now may not be the best for you, right? But the person you seek out to be that, to help you reflect on your own thinking has to be somebody that is trained just to listen and to reflect back things for you, a thinking partner. And that's really what a coach is a thinking partner. So often we go to our families, and what do we hear from our families and friends? Oh, this is what you have to do because this is what I did in my divorce.
Right.
Right? Or this is, you want to be sure to avoid this. This is what I did, and it was a disaster. So they hear about all of the negative things, the mistakes that other people have made. And, so they begin focusing on those numbers and on the, the settlement pieces where really the problems the obstacles are coming from their own thinking. And that thinking are just those emotional attachments that they're making, to their positions.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you're not able to see any other positions, then you're going to keep sticking to that same thing, which isn't going to get you anywhere, which is going to keep leading you down the wrong path. So not going it alone is really key, and having a good thinking partner and sounding board that will really help you kind of connect the dots and understand, where your thinking might be leading you to some really bad consequences.
So let's have a quick chat about those consequences for somebody who believes they can go it alone and attempts to actually do that. What could be some of the consequences of doing that then, Pegotty?
Well, just the examples of the taking the my way or the highway approach, digging your heels in and wanting it your way. What happens is when you start engaging with somebody in a conversation about, settlement, for example, they're going to put up their own wall of resistance. So what you have is two people not actually having any communication. And that absence of communication, the resistance that you have to the other person or to hearing anything different, is going to make the divorce much longer, much more costly. Mm-hmm. And you could angrily bypass a perfectly good solution just because you want to be right. And then in the end, you might just get ground down and make another one of the biggest mistakes, which is throwing in the towel and, just kind of rolling over and say, okay, I don't care, right? Take what you want.
Right.
I'll sign anything. Just let me get this over and done with so I can get on with my life. The problem is you now don't have the resources that you need to go on and create the next chapter.
Right. It's definitely something to be aware of and to avoid. So let me ask you this then, Pegotty, without going into your background or your formal education, as we're going to go into that a little bit later, how many years have you been a practicing certified divorce coach?
I've been a coach since 2001, and
right.
in 2003 I opened up my own coaching practice.
Okay, so would it be safe to say then, Pegotty, that in all of those years you've helped hundreds of people?
Oh, definitely.
Okay, so when you reflect back on all of the people who you've helped then, Pegotty, what's most important to you about, or what's been the most important thing to you about being able to help those people to achieve their desired outcomes?
I'm going to talk about the people going through divorce because there are some people that have just been having workplace difficulties, and that's a little bit different. But the people going through divorce, I see that there's a huge impact on families when divorces don't go well. And families are the main ways that we have of socializing our next generation, right? Acculturating our next generation to values and, to having empathy for other people. And the impact of divorce on children is huge. And it doesn't have to be that way. There are children that survive divorce, just the splitting of two people. They can survive that just fine as long as the parents can come back together and be good co-parents. And I think that everything that happens at the very beginning of the divorce process all the decisions you make at the very beginning set the trajectory for how the divorce is going to go. And if you think, for example, that the only way to initiate the divorce process is to serve someone papers, that's often a very big, that's people often feel like they're blindsided by that. And, there are other ways to accomplish the same thing, but they don't know about those things. And so going to somebody who can see the whole picture, who kind of knows what some of the options are, and give them some choice. They can go and interview mediators and attorneys and collaborative law groups. So I think that it's important to recognize that you have choices at the very beginning of the process, and that those choices that you make will set the trajectory for your divorce.
Mm. I'm so pleased that you brought up the topic of family and especially the children. The very reason for me starting this series on Impact Makers Radio of Let's Talk Divorce if you look at my website on the About Us page on the Impact Makers Radio site, it will say that it's dedicated to bridging the communication gap between professionals and the growing public trying to desperately find jargon-free information about choosing a professional to represent their case. So that's one reason why we're doing this show, is to give people yourself a voice, a platform to speak with the community out there. But the underlying reason is a very personal one for myself, and it's something that you touched on. I myself, as a 9-year-old child, went through a very volatile divorce. My parents, there was lots of fighting, there was lots of blood, there was lots of violence, and there was nowhere where I could turn for help. So as a young child, I internalized all that, blamed myself for the divorce, and carried that guilt through to my teenage years, through to my young adulthood years. And it had an effect on, the jobs I did, the relationships I went into. And still today, even though I've worked a lot on myself, a lot of personal development, a lot of self and inward reflection, it still rears its ugly head now and again. I just have tools and processes in place to deal with that. However, the main reason is that when professionals like you come onto the show and share such great insights as you have been doing so far today, my hope is that the listener who may be in that position where they're facing a divorce and it's not so amicable and they do have children and the children are caught up in the middle, my hope is that if that's you, to look at things differently, to put your children first instead of yourselves, and to love your children more than you hate each other at the moment. So I'm so glad that you brought up that point about family and family values and raising responsible citizens for the future. This is what the show is all about. So I'm even more honored to have you on the show today, Pegotty. So thank you so much for sharing that insight with us.
So I had a client recently who was really at odds with her spouse, and they hadn't really started the divorce process yet. And as I talked to her, I heard that, she was making another one of the biggest mistakes was just treating her, was this breakdown in communication and treating her spouse as the enemy. And when we talked about how she feels when she's the enemy, considered the enemy, she doesn't like it. She behaves, she reacts badly. And so the question is, why would he react any differently?
Right.
Right? And maybe just the simple act of thinking of him as a human being again, rather than the enemy, that object thing, that obstacle, might do wonders for all of the conversations that you want to have next about how you're going to partner in co-parenting your daughter.
You know something, Pegotty, I have a feeling that you and I could sit here for hours and still only scratch the tip of the iceberg.
I love talking about this because it does make such a huge difference for people.
It does. I'm so glad that you're out there making a positive impact on people's lives. Unfortunately, we are limited with time, so could you then just spend a brief moment telling us a little bit about your background, your formal education, and your experience as it relates to the topic of divorce?
Well, I like to tell people that I'm educated as a cultural anthropologist because that's what I have my degree in.
Like that.
But I never worked as an anthropologist, but much of the work that I do now really benefits from my understanding of how people tick, how people make decisions through their various filters, like, values and education and experience and ethnic and religious upbringing. So, I had a career as an executive, and then after about, I think it was 25 or 30 years, I decided I was going to do something different. So I took my first coach training and started a practice about 15 years ago. What really influenced me in this area was my husband, who had become a Supreme Court of Florida certified family mediator. And he got trained as a financial coach and came home and said, this is really the missing professional in divorce. Will you help me? And so I said, I had been divorced very young. I was still very ashamed of it, even though it had been years. So I understood that part of it. And he had been a child of divorce, and he had experienced, the negative impact. And so we began working together, just handling, collaborating with clients. And then about 6 years ago, we decided we were going to kind of take all the structures that we'd created and all of the success that we'd had with clients and kind of formalize them into a training program so we could actually encourage more people to become really professional divorce coaches. And, that was the way we saw of changing the experience of divorce for individuals and families. And so we created something, called the CDC Certified Divorce Coach Training and Certification Program about 6 years ago. And now, ironically, we're training people from as far away as China, the Pacific Rim, Europe, throughout Canada and the U.S., because this is not just a U.S. phenomenon. It's a worldwide phenomenon. And so I came to this as an outsider to the process of divorce. I'm not an attorney. I'm not any of those things, but I had a new perspective and a new solution for clients through what I call the magic of divorce coaching. And so I think that, divorce coaching is described as a dispute resolution process. So it has some, standing in the legal community, and the divorce coach is really the missing professional in the divorce process. My opinion.
So, yeah, and I agree, because when I think about, again, I'm not an attorney, but when I think about the divorce process, it's very black and white. You have a couple who are going through their divorce, and they will go to an attorney, and the attorney will do what they need to do, but there's just so many other things between the lines on the psychological point of view. And I think what you do and what you train your coaches to do, I think that is the missing link that you're referring to. That's the glue that brings it all together. So yes, they're going to need an attorney at some stage. You can't file
Absolutely.
the divorce, you can't do the paperwork, etc. But the humane side of it, for which the attorney is not qualified or doesn't even have time for, that's what you do, right? Am I thinking along the right lines?
Absolutely. The divorce coaching is is a specialty coaching. It's specialty coaching, and therefore one of our roles is to help the client understand what the lay of the land is, not with regard to their piece, but like who are all of the people, who are the resources that you are going to want to need to contact.
Mm-hmm.
So we refer people to divorce attorneys, to therapists, to financial professionals, to real estate professionals, to insurance providers,
You're right.
all of those people.
Mm-hmm.
So we are part educator, part resource, part champion, and mostly a coach.
You're right.
But we do all of those things to really help them make the best possible decisions for their future based on their particular interests, needs, and concerns, including how am I going to go through this process? How am I going to view my spouse? What kind of relationship do I want with him or her afterwards?
So, correct. Just make sure that I'm getting this correct for me, Pegotty. If I am considering divorce and I come across somebody like yourself and they have the title of certified divorce coach, it's not a either or situation, as in either I need a divorce coach or an attorney. It's a in addition to situation.
Yeah, we help clients build their divorce team.
Right. Fantastic.
The team, the team is going to include lots of different people: an attorney, maybe a therapist, a financial person, whoever it is that they need.
Right.
So we are happy to not only refer them to people, but help them get ready for that conversation, to help them get clear about their thinking about what they need.
Right. So you can just put that whole 360-degree approach, they'll build that whole 360-degree approach around that particular client, right?
Absolutely. That's a good way to describe it. I like that.
Fantastic. Well, feel free to use that, but don't forget where to send the check, okay? So listen, we're slowly running out of time here, Peggy. We're having so much fun, and you've shared so many great insights. When you think about those people, those individuals who you help that come to you and they're wanting to know more about the kind of mistakes that you shared today, the kind of mistakes they should avoid, what final thoughts would you like to leave with them before we move on to our last question for today?
Well, I have a book that I've written, and I think that was written for people so that they could self-coach themselves through these mistakes. And it's available on Amazon. It's called Divorce: Overcome the Overwhelm and Avoid the 6 Biggest Mistakes, Insights from Personal Divorce Coaches. And so it helps people sort of understand how their thinking can get in the way, how to identify the big mistake, what the consequences are, and then there's a series of questions for them to ask themselves so that they can kind of work their way through the process of making a different decision or, thinking through some different options.
Right. So if I'm driving in my car right now and I'm listening into this show sometime in the future, and I've heard you talking about the 6 biggest mistakes in divorce and how to avoid them. Before I go to the Barnes & Noble or order it on Amazon, I want to know now, what are those 6 biggest mistakes? Can you just quickly run through those before we find out how people can get hold of you?
Sure. The first one is forgetting who the decision makers are, meaning you abdicate on your decision making. I'll let somebody else make that decision. The second mistake is taking my way or the highway, that style of negotiation. I'm right. I know I'm right. I'm not going to consider any other possibilities. The third is limiting the resources that I go to. I'm just going to rely on my attorney. I'm just going to rely on my family or friends. that's really unrealistic expectation that anyone is going to be able to provide all the information you need to get through all the changes that are going on in divorce. The fourth one is throwing in the towel, just kind of getting so ground down and so worn down that you can't go on. So, we have to figure out a way to regenerate your reserves. And the fifth one is betting the farm on another relationship. It's a form of throwing in the towel, but it's basically not completing your current divorce process well before jumping into another relationship and assuming that relationship is it. And one never knows, right? And then the last one is wanting guarantees and certainty. Wanting guarantees and certainty, which, could be symptomatic of a lot of different thought processes, a lot of different thinking. I'm afraid of the future. I don't know enough to make a decision, or I'm not ready to be divorced yet.
Right, of course. So, listen, Pegotty, if somebody feels they want to know more about those 6 biggest mistakes or anything else they feel that you could help them with, what's the easiest way for them to connect with you?
So the best way is through my website, which is certifieddivorcecoach.com. If you are interested in talking to a certified divorce coach, you can find them on our website that I gave you, certifieddivorcecoach.com. There's a Find a Divorce Coach directory there. Or send me an email at Pegotty, Pegotty, at certifieddivorcecoach.com.
Okay, folks, that is all we have time for today. Again, as a reminder, we have been listening to certified divorce coach Pegotty Cooper. Thank you so much for sharing so generously with us today, Pegotty. You have certainly demonstrated that you are a true educator, advocate, and trustworthy advisor for your client's success. So thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You are so welcome, my dear. And I'd also like to say a big thank you to you. Yes, the listener. Thank you for joining us on what I could only describe as a very insightful and informative conversation with one of the top certified divorce coaches in the Tampa, Florida area today. Again, her name is Pegotty Cooper. Make sure you do check her out. Give her a call. Visit her website. You definitely want to go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble and ask for a copy of her book. Those 6 mistakes sound so good, Pegotty. I think I'm going to file for divorce just so that I can put your book through the paces. Anyway, whatever you decide to do, I'm sure that if you get in touch with Pegotty, you're going to be in a great place to get started. So that's it for today, folks. Again, my name is Stewart Andrew Alexander, and we'll be back shortly with some more leading divorce professionals in this, our series of Let's Talk Divorce Conversations. So, until then, take care, have a great day, and we'll talk real soon.
Thank you for tuning in to Impact Makers Radio. To listen to all past, present, and future industry thought leaders and trendsetters, visit us at impactmakersradio.com.